The History of Dance, an African-American creation directed by Viviana Angel. Jaba dance was the first African-based dance that was born in the United States, and it was born on plantations. This dance involved a lot of stomping, clapping, and hitting of the thighs, which was done in order to get around the slave owners' ban on drums. Most enslaved individuals were brought from West and Central Africa, and some of the specific tribes were Igbo, Dogon, Bamana, Mende, and Ewe, but there are many, many more. This tells us that even though they were all from Africa, a lot of these tribes had different languages, cultures, and even dances, and it was really hard for them to integrate, but dance was the way in which these tribes and different cultures kind of adapted to each other and made something that unified them as a whole. The slavery era. So, as we mentioned before, the Jaba dance was around the slavery era, but something that was very prominent and still is today is the ring shout. This dance is the oldest continuously practiced African-derived dance in the United States, and all over the United States it's still practiced today, mostly by African Americans. It's really strong in Christian or religious communities that African Americans are present because it kind of unites them together, and it's formed a way to remember cultural and religious content that takes them back to the times of slavery, and it represents kind of like what it means to be African and African American through music and dance traits. Early 20th century. So the first kind of dance that we're going to talk about that was born from African American individuals was the buck dance. The spit dance consisted of movements only from the hips down, and it was often just with feet movement that were audible taps. And some argue that this is what tap was born from. Transitioning into tap, Savion Glover is one of the best tap dancers in the whole world, and he is known internationally. He is African American, and he actually plays in Happy Feet. He plays mambo in his dancing feet, so that's kind of interesting. So the cakewalk came around the 1920s, and it was actually a way for African American individuals to make fun of their slave masters, and throughout the time it was performed, the masters had no idea. The Charleston, African Americans created this dance. This was kind of the craze of the 1920s, and it was based on freeing of movement and rhythm. The Lindy Hop is a very, very popular dance. This was a partner dance, and there were various competitions, and there was something even called acrobatic Lindy Hop, which a lot of tricks were done. The Big Apple was a very popular dance as well. This was originated in an African American nightclub, and it was called the Big Apple in Columbia, South Carolina around the mid-1930s. In this dance, there's a circle. Even though this was unusual for the time period, it related back to the ring shout. And so the dance, people would stand around and went counterclockwise, and they raised their arms high and kind of recite the same dance that the person in the middle would recite. Other dances from this time period were jazz, swing, and the jitterbug. So as we've seen, Black culture has had a tremendous influence on dance and other forms of art in the early 20th century, and in New York and Harlem it became predominantly Black, as we probably know already, and therefore a lot of music and dances originated from there. And a lot of the people that were in the first all-Black Broadway musical in 1921, Shuffle Along, were from Harlem. Transitioning into the 21st century. So twist became very popular in the 1950s, and this was actually brought over in the 19th century from Congo. Disco, as you can hear, became popular in the 1970s. This was incorporated sounds that disc jockeys made using mechanically and electronic means. So now we're going to get into something that's a little bit more complicated, and this is the concept of black dance. Black dance as a concept was first used to define dances choreographed by African American individuals, and this was used for the first time around the 1960s. Nowadays, it's more looked at as something that gives African American community a sense of unity, and that evolves around dance. This expression of these dances allows African Americans to communicate and emphasize their stories, which historically hasn't really been possible a lot of the time. At this point in time in the 1960s, the characteristics of styles of Black choreographers and dancers were labeled as Black dance. but now it's more of a defined pride and sense of blackness, and something that has truly flourished, and didn't flourish before the 1960s supposedly, but as you have seen in this film, that is not true in any sense, but specifically in the world of dance. As beautifully said by Carol Johnson, freedom is what Black people are seeking. Black dance does not preach a particular ideology, rather than a secular style of dance. This expression, Black dance, indicates the particular historical time and the conditions in which Black people currently find themselves. Persistence in ballet. Eurocentric beauty standards of body, shape, muscle tone, and skin color have continued to exclude African-descended individuals from ballet. Even though this is true, a handful of people have been able to overcome this and make a career out of professional ballet. Misty Copeland is a very modern example of this. She has become a rising star in the classical world of dance and is known throughout the whole entire world. She is the first African American woman to be named a principal dancer at the American Ballet Theater, and this has never been done before. As a teenager, Misty was told that she was never going to become a ballerina due to her body type and roots. Nevertheless, Misty persisted, and now she is one of the most successful dancers in the whole entire world. Raven Wilkinson, one of the first African American ballerinas to be permitted to join a ballet company, was around in the 1950s. She danced with Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, and she also performed various times. However, she was forced to wear paint on her face in order to pass as a white woman. Carmen de la Vallade succeeded her cousin Janet Collins, which I will be talking about soon, and she was a principal dancer with the Met's Opera and was a guest artist of the American Ballet Theater. She started performing in Lester Horton Dance Theater in her hometown of Los Angeles, and she's appeared in 4 movies and has worked with most well-known African American choreographers of her time. Janet Collins was probably one of the most well-known dancers of her time. She was born in New Orleans in 1917 and trained in Los Angeles with Lester Horton and Carmelita Marachi. She auditioned for prominent companies but was often rejected because she was not white. She was often told that either special parts were going to be made for her or she had to paint her face white. In New York City, she got a special part that was made for her as an Ethiopian character in the work of Aida. This was one of her more prominent roles. She danced in the Met Opera, which was a very prominent company at her time. She has taught at the School of American Ballet, Marymount Manhattan College, and San Francisco Ballet School. She was awarded the Dance Magazine Award in 1959, which was a very big deal at the time and still is today. Black women in modern dance. Black modern dance movement was inspired by 2 women in particular who were not only dancers but also academics who did a great deal of research of Black dance in the United States. Katherine Dunham is one of them. She was born in 1909 in Illinois and died in 2006 in New York City. She attended the University of Chicago and became famous by appearing on Broadway, the musical Les Jazz Hot. She introduced a dance called Lagata to Broadway, which was based on rhythms and martial arts and derived from Africa. Slaves used to do this dance in order to develop their stamina in preparation for uprisings against their white masters. She developed her own technique, which drew on ballet and, of course, modern dance. She founded the School of Dance in 1944 that was her own, in which basic dance forms such as tap, ballet, modern, and percussion were taught, and she also taught philosophy, anthropology, and other languages which she thought were relevant to dance. Pearl Primus was born in 1919 in Trinidad and died in 1994 in New York City. She was the other woman who was responsible for the Black modern dance movement. She attended NYU and was the first modern Black dancer to graduate. Her very first performance was called Strange Fruit. This piece, to this day, is still very famous, and it had no music, but she danced to a poem about a Black man being lynched. This was very inspirational to Black movement and Black dance, and it obviously had a political message regarding the struggles of African American individuals. Even though she was born in Trinidad, her parents immigrated to Harlem when she was just a young child. She obtained her PhD on dance and focused on the funga, which is an African dance of welcome. Her technique has been studied all over the world and still is today. A prominent Black modern dancer today is Jasmine Harper. A few years ago, she was second place in So You Think You Can Dance, and now she tours all around the world as Beyoncé's main backup dancer. Modern day international world influence. Hip-hop is certainly a very prominent dance genre nowadays. Most, if not all, of the movements in hip-hop derive from African American dances in the early 1900s or African dance. This dance is very diverse as a discipline because it is very fast and acrobatic, but it can also be very slow and focused and steady. A lot of social dances nowadays are accredited to hip-hop. Hip-hop, it used to be considered a street dance and something that wasn't really concrete or technical, but nowadays it is accepted in studios, universities, and even competitions. It is recognized as one of the most important dances of the world today. One of the best known dancers today is Fiction. He won So You Think You Can Dance a couple of years ago, and it was the first time that an African American hip hop dancer won the show. African derived dance characteristics. These characteristics show us the presence of African-based movement in a variety of modern dance genres. Orientation to the earth. These dances are more grounded in order to appreciate the earth. Some modern examples of this are hip-hop, modern, and other dance forms. Improvisation. This was something that was often prohibited from other dance forms, such as ballet. However, nowadays, improvisation dominates some of the dance world. It is a way for individuals to come up with their own variation of different techniques and express who they truly are. A lot of hip-hop nowadays is what we call improvisation. Importance to community. Traditional African culture values communities much more than individuals, unlike American culture. Therefore, the gathering of people is extremely important. We can see that modern dances such as salsa, merengue, and Caribbean dance incorporate African-based movement because of this. Polyrhythms. African-based movement dances incorporate music with several rhythms being displayed at the same time. We can see this in hip-hop and salsa nowadays. Percussion. Percussion nowadays dominates music, but this was not always the truth. In Africa, percussion was the most prominent usement of sound, and it still is today. Even though drums and other percussion instruments were banned throughout the formal slave period, it is important to consider that percussion can be made through body parts, such as the feet. We can see this as a modern-day example in tap. Pantomime. African dance reflects the motion of everyday life. Even though this is debatable in some dances because it is more abstract than others, it is used to generate a story that can be traced to African dance. A modern-day example of this is modern dance. Competition. Nowadays, dance competitions happen all around the world. Throughout Central and West Africa, dance competitions have been happening for hundreds of years. We can see examples of modern-day dance competitions through television and television shows like So You Think You Can Dance. The history of dance. Remember that African Americans are responsible for, if not all, most of American dance forms. Thanks for watching.